We're going to be showing ways that we visualized infrastructure and behavior that we find using botnets. And it helps us to connect relationships between botnets attack and infrastructure. So go ahead.
About us.
You.
So I'm Andrea Scarfo. Currently, I work for Cisco Umbrella. We used to be OpenDNS. We're in San Francisco. I've been there since 2015. Previously, I was a sysadmin for 12 years for various companies, Kraft Foods, Hewlett Packard, and a local city in California, Danville.
And I'm Josh Peoria. I'm a security researcher also with Cisco Umbrella. Used to work at NASA for about 5 years and did some work at Mandiant for about a year. So been doing security for maybe 15 years or so. All right, so we'll be talking about what a botnet is. For example, this page here is, this is someone on like a dark net page that's selling botnet activity. They can sell rats and just access to various botnets, which might be used for DDoS attempts or distribution of ransomware or other things like that. As you can see here, a botnet it's basically a network of private computers that have been compromised by some kind of malware, and they are controlled as a group, and then that group of computers can be rented out or purchased or used for whatever someone else wants to use it for, and it can be done for really cheap cost as well. So you can rent it for 10 minutes or 5 minutes or a minute or days and use it for as long as you need to.
So the main reason why we are even interested in researching botnets is because of all the criminal activity that goes on that they spread. So like ransomware, spam, sending malicious attachments through spam, malvertising, rats, remote access Trojans are spread through botnets, and then also exploit kits are involved with compromised websites.
Our goals is to do visuals to display this data. We want to be able to just turn this random data, seemingly random data, into useful information using some kind of thing that will convey the message very quickly. It helps us, so when we're looking at like a huge list of IP addresses and domain names, and like we block a lot of things and unblock things all the time, it helps us not, you don't want to just block everything you see. We've all made mistakes, I'm sure, in the security industry where you accidentally block Microsoft or Symantec because it's in a big list provided by someone else. It also helps you, the visualizations will help you see those connections and the relationships of attack campaigns with botnets and help you give you context and perspective.
So moving on to the life cycle of a bot. So similar to the same way that malware has a life cycle that it goes through, like the creation, the deployment stage, and then the acts that it's going to carry out when it's on a system, a bot will act the same way. So we'll start with infection and spreading. So this is how the bots are going to get onto the systems to add another bot into the botnet. So this is an example of spam here. Spam, typically you'll see a link in the email that they want you to click, but sometimes the link will be hidden, so it might be under a URL shortener, so you can't actually see the link that you're going to go to, or the spam will actually include just a malicious attachment.
Yeah, another method you might see is injection of code into a web page, like a compromised website. In this case, this is a iframe injection into a site that we found that leads to this page. And these are actual using some of the data that we have, able to see the referrers that were sending people to this page. So these are all compromised websites. So we're able to take that data and then look into it more, as we'll see as we go on.
Another way that they spread the botnet is through rats, so remote access Trojans. One method that we have that we're using to find these rats is by scraping pastebin. So we have a pastebin scraper that scrapes paste that looks for the text that is binary or base 64 encoded text. So this is an example here of one that we found that's all in binary code. And if we download this to a system and then run it in a sandbox environment, we can see it making the callouts to the RATS command and control server. And mostly these ones are found to be all communicating to dynamic DNS domains.
Another vector of infection is malvertising. So you can, you can buy ads, and it can be posted on all sorts of sites. You can choose where you want it to be. A lot of these companies that provide the ads, some of them don't care what the ad is. So maybe you're exploiting something in the browser, like a Flash player or something like that. So you could theoretically get people who visit a popular site like New York Times or something like that, which has actually been seen to happen. Oh, and in this case, some advertising, we were able to see that it affected pretty much Canada. It was targeting Canada. Using this graph, you can kind of see the majority of these infections from this one malvertising campaign, in this case, were primarily Canada, so that's kind of interesting.
So then moving on to the command and control contact stage.
Oh, all right, so there's domain flux, which is a lot of domains will be generated. They might be non-existent domains or something like that, but a whole bunch of domains will be generated and be called out to by the malware. You might see something like this is just a scrolling list of domains, and it'll zoom in, and this is what a DGA might look like. So DGA is like generated automatically by malware. And like I said, then many of them will be NX, non-existent, not registered. But then, so you have a lot of noise, to dig through. It's hard to visualize that unless you can do something like this, which is totally messy. But you can see that there's this circle of domains on the outside. Those don't have any connections to any IP addresses, or I could also connect it to who is information, things like that. In this case, I've got the jumble of stuff in the center that is connections, and it's outside stuff that I'm not as interested in. Maybe it's not as big a threat. And typically, if you have a good data set, one of those DGAs will be the CNC. That's the server that the clients or the victims will contact for additional instructions. And then once they contact it, they are added to the botnet and then there for the service of the botnet.
So another tactic is IP flux. So the domains that they're using, the DGA domains, they'll change IP addresses rapidly to try to hide their location. And then also they'll hide behind different proxy layers to hide where the command and control server actually is. So just an example of that, starting at the infected system that's going to accept and carry out all of the commands from the server, the communications can then go through some more infected user systems that are able to act as a HTTP proxy between the bots and the CNC server. And then typically there's another layer here of compromised web servers to act as another proxy before finally getting to the command and control server with the communications.
In that case, you might see that those systems are starting to use for DDoS attempts, which are the most common uses, or the most widespread, or for a spam bot to send out additional malware for additional infection, or like an info stealer, like a banking Trojan or something like that, or a RAT, remote access Trojan, so they can gain access to a system and do whatever they want. And also then drops additional malware. And then at that point, this is just malware analysis, general stuff. Like they'll continue using the techniques of fast fluxing, so lots of domains being generated, and proxies to keep that CNC hidden. And they want to stay undetected on the system, which is pretty common because the longer it can be on there, the more it can be used in the botnet. And this fully undetectable, it's a term, FUD, to always be. It's like the malware creators want to be undetectable by AV, basically. And so in some cases, you will see they won't make a lot of network callouts, like to the actual CNC, because they don't want to ruin it and get that CNC blocked. Um, and of course, it'll gain persistence, so it might set up a task or like some registry entry, or if it's, I mean, pretty much that's just Windows systems, but that's what we're covering pretty much.
So for uncovering the infrastructure, we have different techniques that we use. One of them is passive DNS. So basically, this is historical information on domains and IP addresses, and then we have that we're able to see the relationships between them. So we're gonna just show an example of digging through passive DNS here, starting with an example of hailstorm spam. So it's regular spam, but the term hailstorm is what Talos calls it when it's seen like on our resolvers, because there's such a large activity of query count all at once, very high, into thousands. So they're just calling it a hailstorm. But so this is the IP address here that we noticed is sending out spam. And just using an example of virus totals passive DNS information here, for this IP address, we can see a list of domains that they have seen hosted on this IP. And if you look at them, a lot of them seem to be related to pharma fraud.
Yeah, and looking at another passive DNS tool, because there's multiple ones. This is actually from a company that provides this data, but their interface is something that's open source, and I've installed it myself to build a passive DNS server to watch changes as they happen. But you can see that domain was on this IP at that time, and they're also on other IPs at different times. And you can do some cool stuff with that, as we'll get to eventually. And continuing on that, you can see other domains that have been on one of those other IPs that were related, and they match the same pattern of this pharma fraud behavior. Same with this one. You're seeing this, or that's the exact same domain name. It's just at a different IP. And if we, I believe if we go to that IP, we're looking at this, we're seeing there's a ton of records of domains that have been at that, and they look suspicious. I just highlighted a couple of them, or 3 of them, but you can get the idea. And
Yeah, so
yeah, go ahead.
more pharma fraud domains. These domains we've actually seen sending the spam, so it's actually coming from this IP address. The spam is being sent out, but also these are the domains that will be linked in the email messages that you can click on to, go buy your pharmaceuticals. Most of these domains are probably compromised web servers.
Oh, we zoomed in.
So on this one IP address, we saw 857 domains, second level domains 422, and third level subdomains were 833, just on the one. So moving on from one of those domains we found on the other, the beginning IP address, we'll see that if we query for that domain in VirusTotal, we'll see the list of IP addresses that it has resolved to historically in the past. So this one IP address here, the 185, we made a visualization here about that IP.
So, I mean, there's so many different options for visualizations, and timelines are a great one. It was kind of difficult to figure out how to do this, but looking, we settled on this option. This domain list scrolls way up. There's 800 something domains, but you can see at the bottom, this is like a D3 thing, so you can look at it on a web page and zoom in and zoom out. But I'm not showing that. But you can see at the bottom there's a time when these domains are actually being active. So you can use that if you go to the next one. Like on a larger time scale, you can see kind of when the campaign was happening with those domains when they're moving around. That's very interesting. And then there's one domain way back that was used, that we've seen used in other campaigns as well.
And VirusTotal will we'll also give you more information, like if other users leave comments. So from one of those domains, we're able to see that it's connected with the Yambo Financial pharma fraud, which Spam House had been investigating them. It's just a big spam business. So on these IPs, we don't just see the pharmaceutical spam. We also see it actually sending Locky in these email messages. We're going to talk about one of the samples that we saw sent out, and then show how we pulled out the command and control contact information and connected it through. So this is the top line is the hash that we were analyzing. So it was seen sending this attachment, which is a like UPS delivery message, supposed to be like you have a package, but you have Locky. So running it in a sandbox environment, we can see these like behaviors that the malware is doing on the system, that it was identified by an AV engine as Locky, and also the Kofta Trojan was detected here. So these are the network callouts. You'll see on the bottom there the post request to the command and control server. So now that we have that IP address that we believe to be the command and control server, we just can search the internet for some open source intelligence. So this is from abuse.ch. So they've also seen this IP address related to Locky and as a C2.
So going beyond passive DNS, there's some other ways to look at data. If you have access to something that is looking at query volume, like DNS traffic, you could see a crazy spike in the traffic all of a sudden. You can get other data like who is record data, also historical who is, things like, well, yeah, who is data. You can get the IP address, like we've talked about it quite a bit, and the TTLs, so you can look at if it's a domain that is changing IPs constantly, so it has a very low time to live, or it's a high time to live, maybe it's on hold, just hanging out. And then this is interesting, if you can, if you, in your own environment, looking into DNS traffic, or using a third-party service, you can look at the geo-distribution. So this is like a list of the people, of the countries visiting and the percentages of those countries. So with a very large campaign, you can correlate things and see that maybe if something is targeting something like that previous thing, targeting Canada. And another really interesting and useful thing, if using third-party sources, you can find co-occurrences. So co-occurring domains are domains that are visited at the same time or very close to the time that that domain is visited, which is great because you can find other CNCs that are maybe about to be used or are being used in the same campaign or slightly different, but they're related, and you can attribute them to the same attacker. In our work, like we're using some paid products, and we're also using a lot of OSINT to show things. So one of the things we use is malwaretrafficanalysis.net. It's a guy named Brad who runs the site, and he does really amazing work, a blog post on every single thing he puts up and all the PCAPs and traffics. It's a gold mine for mining data and finding out what's happening out in the world. You can just grab one PCAP, pull a bunch of CNCs or one CNC out of it, and follow that chain all the way down to uncover a huge amount of botnet or ransomware stuff.
Another one is My Online Security. So on this site, they'll actually focus on when spam campaigns are happening and which attack they're pushing out. So this is also very helpful, and they'll be able to attribute it and say, hey, we're seeing the Necker's botnet pushing, this type of attack campaign at this time. And also Bleeping Computer, like they have a lot of really relevant information right when it happens, also about spam campaigns. Another one is DJ Archive. So here, it's a database of reverse engineered DJs, and they have the regexes here where you can put in a domain and it will tell you what family they believe that it matches on. So you can put in a bunch of DGAs and it will tell you, oh, this looks like it matches the regex for Neckers, so it might be a Neckers DGA. And then of course also virus totals, so you can get hash samples that are uploaded by the InfoSec community and honeypots.
Also, the uploaded by antivirus, oh, sorry, by virus or malware creators to test to see if it's going to be caught. We use a lot of feeds too. One feed we use is Bamanek. He actually gave a workshop a couple days ago. He runs a bunch of, I mean, he's spoken here and elsewhere about the work he does, but it's really awesome stuff. He runs a whole bunch of malware sandboxes, constantly analyzing things out in the world, and then he just provides these lists broken down by different kind of botnets and ransomware and all sorts of stuff. So we can pull that out. And the majority of our data, initially we started with just dealing with taking Bamanek's data and ingesting it. And we did some stuff with virus total hashes, but the stuff that we'll show in a little bit is pretty much just with the Bamanek. Am I talking about this?
Uncovering infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
So when we're uncovering the infrastructure, we get IOCs. And throughout the different stages of when the bot is running on the system and communicating to the CNC server, we'll get different types of IOCs. So we'll get domain names. So this is when the CNC communications happen, and this is when they're trying to contact the DGAs, and you'll also see the NX domains. And from there, we'll also get IP addresses from the hosting IPs on these domains. From the name servers and the email registrant, we'll use whois information. And then when we get hashes, this is typically, we see that dropped by rats contained in the spam, or dropped by a compromised website, or through malvertising.
A lot of the process is cleaning the data. I feel like this is something you have to do with everything you do in security. You have to take it and manage it somehow. So, I mean, this is a mess to look at, but these are some hashes. It's a real big pain to look at. It hashes and the queries related to those hashes. So this is pulled from virus total. We just said search for Neckers or search for some other botnet or traffic. And you can then graph it and you get a better picture of it. It's still not a pretty graph, but it's better than looking at the JSON blob that you saw before. So you can see these hashes right here. I'll contact these domains. There's some legitimate domains in there, but there's also some other unusual ones. And then you can also do other interesting things with that data. You can look at like a time to live, those numbers that these domains match up to. So the 6400, that's a really high time to live, so those domains are probably not being moved around. Well, they aren't being moved around. And this 100 time to live, so these domains are switching between IP addresses. It gives you a cool perspective. Of course, if you clean your data poorly, you're going to get things like this. And so you have to really be cautious and careful. Helps to have a drink while you program. What we did with the Bamanek stuff, we actually took it and we ran it through a lot of different third-party sources and some internal sources. Since we're with Cisco, we can do some cool stuff. And we grabbed data. We took the domain seen on Neckers primarily, and grabbed a bunch of stuff like the name servers, the whois information, the first seen date. That's the date that it was first seen, visited or queried by a client out there somewhere, and the last seen as well, which is useful. We do some graphics and visuals with that stuff, and it just goes into MongoDB because he releases his data daily and then it's gone, so we needed historical data. And in the case of, at the point we were doing some visuals for this, we had 175 IPs related to botnet CNC servers over pretty much a month period.
So uncovering the behavior once we have these IOCs, you'll see here, it's just a list of IPs. It's hard to tell anything. It doesn't tell you much if you're just looking at a list of IPs. And also, some of them might not even be related, or they're, legitimate IPs. It's not something you would want to block. And then what we want to find from that is the relationships between all of the indicators. So how one IOC relates to the other and helps us get intelligence on the infrastructure. So we were deciding which behavior features would be most interesting for this. So we thought about the latitude and longitude of the IPs that we found, how many clients were actually visiting these domains, the first seen date of a particular IOC, and then how they're all connected.
Um, and in some cases, a lot of them aren't connected to anything. Like they may have a non-routable IP address or something unusual like that, 888, like a DNS address, or a 255 address, or something that's reserved for special use. And that actually is telling about some kind of behavior too, like that domain is being saved for something, or it was used and it's just been turned off, basically. In the case of this, like this DGA up here that we found related to just looking at botnets, it's pointing to an IP address which is actually reserved for special use. So it's not going to go anywhere, but it looks like it has a relationship. And some IPs are usually they may be compromised web servers used to hide the CNC. They aren't actually the CNC, but just a note.
So particularly, we looked at the Neckers botnet. Just a quick overview of that. Most of the infection method, I mean, it's similar to what we talked about earlier: spam with malicious attachments, malvertising, exploit kits, malicious links and emails. The most prominent malware is ransomware. We also see banking Trojans. And it's also noteworthy that the Neckers bot has a DDoS ability itself, and they use 2 different DGAs to help keep the communication secret.
And I've mentioned co-occurring DGAs and hosting IPs, why they might be important. They can lead to more IOCs. If we're gonna some of the visuals we use this next this thing called Open Graffiti. It's actually open source project designed by one of our coworkers, but it's available at opengraffiti.com, and you can download it and run it. And it makes graphs. It's kind of washed out, but it makes graphs like this, and they're movable and stuff, so you can see a better view into things. It's also great if you have to show activity to management. They love that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a visualization we made using Open Graffiti of the co-occurring DGA domains, the IP addresses, and the email registrant. And the lines are showing the connection. So the email registrant to the domain to the IP address, and then how they're all connected. So this helps us get a better understanding.
Yeah, this is just another view of it. You can, so I mentioned this is open source, and to actually make those connections, we use NetworkX, which is an open source library of Python, to link things together. And then you can use semantic net, which is another way to generate basically a JSON file that is openable by this. And we talked about latitude and longitude. These are Neckers domains. They're hosting DGAs, and these are co-occurrences related. We can get more in depth, and you can color code things, and you can we didn't show it, would have been cool to show it, but like a heat map of where people are visiting from, and you can link those together. I mean, this is still a work in progress, so we actually have code that we're writing and still working on. But it's cool to be able to see this. If you see that there's a whole bunch of CNCs in one place, that might prove interesting to your environment.
So the different attack campaigns that in the information that the IOCs that we had for the Neckers botnet, one of them is the Globe Imposter campaign. So this is spread by Neckers through mouse spam. So in the beginning of the talk, we mentioned that we had that email spam with this link here that was sent by a Hailstorm spam bot. And we found this IP address linked in passive DNS.
Then take that IP and look at the domains, the first seen date. This is the first time that they were queried by clients out in the world. And we're using the first seen time from OpenDNS Cisco Umbrella data, so it's like it's about 3 or 4% of the internet, but you get a good picture. You can see a campaign all of a sudden when things took off.
Yeah, so that spam message in the hailstorm spam that's usually sending Right now, typically the pharmaceutical frauds, spam, but that actual message had this globe imposter binary in it. And then once we ran that in a sandbox environment, we were able to see these DGAs that it called out to. And they're actually the same DGAs that the Neckers botnet used that we had from John Bambanek's feed. And then if you want some more data, you can use DGA archive, and it'll tell you which families that it thinks it belongs in. So here we can see also Neckers and Locky might be a possibility.
Another example we'll show is like TrickBot, which is a banking Trojan. It does these. We were able to see post-infection. Sorry, pardon me. Able to see post-infection callouts, like TCP callouts to the CNC server, looking at various sources that we have. We were wondering how many hashes might be related to this kind of thing. So we could use like my online security to look at the latest mouse spam pushes of TrickBot and find some correlation between our data and that. These are just some like another way of visualizing. It's kind of hard to see, but it's not so much that you have to understand the specific information that you can link things up and you can show stuff that you might want to focus on when you're hunting for this kind of data.
So another attack campaign was Locky that we saw, and with this one hash here, we saw it producing Neckers DJs and Locky DJs, and they were all co-occurring. So the queries were all made quickly at the same and during the same time frame. Then we were able to see using malwaretrafficanalysis.net that this was mouse spam being sent out by the Neckers botnet. And then we made another visualization just showing the hash with connecting the queries, so the different domains that were being contacted from that hash.
This is just another way of showing another timeline of first seen. And up on the corner, you can see the number of domains first seen right there. And you can find some patterns using this, especially if you have a large data set. And then looking at this, you can you have the hash of that Locky file, and you can see when that hash was first seen on VirusTotal, and then you can also see all these domains when they were first seen connected to. So there's this campaign happening. Maybe they aren't all related, but it gives you somewhere to start.
So then we made this just quick attack timeline of all the attacks that we were analyzing. So just showing during like this month period in August, all of the different attack campaigns that the Neckers botnet was sending out.
We wanted to show, like, try to make correlations between botnet behavior and current events in the world, but it's hard to do that. It's hard without really making a lot of assumptions and guessing. But if you have this kind of timeline and you keep building it over a long period of time, you might be able to see patterns like maybe during Christmas things change. During in the US, when it's tax time, there's a lot more of a specific kind of spam botnet because they want to get people thinking that their IRS wants them or something. So you might be able to find some relationships or to some kind of activity, which is really interesting. If we continue this and we keep going beyond, we might be able to find correlations to other data.
So now we're on to questions.
Yeah. And we have we've been furiously coding for the last month or so. So I wanted to release stuff out to people, and I still want to do that. And I don't really know how to let you know where to find it, but I'll see if DeepSec will put it on their site or something, or we can put it on Twitter too if you follow us. I probably should have put it on Twitter handles. But I'm at Josh Piori, my name.
And I'm at A Scarfo, but the O is a 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Oh, here's a question.
We got a question.
Yep.
Hi guys. So what are you using this data for to protect users? Are you incorporating this into OpenDNS to make it harder for users to hit these sites?
Yeah, as far as product stuff for our company, yeah, we protect our customers against known botnets, and then future domains that might be seen and future IPs or CNCs that might be seen because they're related. So we'll just block a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll find that when the rest of the world's getting infected, our customers aren't. In a lot of cases, you can't get everything. You can't read the attacker's mind. But,
and what level of automation can you put behind this, or is this really very much still a manual process of digging through?
well, this isn't technically a vendor talk, but we have a lot of automation in our actual products and stuff. Finding things like DGAs, that's automatically done because we have terabytes of data every day that we see. There's a lot of manual stuff with this visualization, but there's a lot of automatic stuff with visualization, and I always try to automate everything anyways. So when the coding we've done, it will actually ingest data like from the Botnet feed or from VirusTotal feeds, and we can just automatically see stuff. So that's kind of nice once you have the system set up.
What kind of tools are you recommending for doing this kind of research?
Okay.
We use NetworkX.
Yeah. Like a relational to make trees of data. You can combine things.
D3.
D3, which is terrible, but it's great. But it's so.
It's hard to work with.
Yeah, Python is our primary language of
Yeah,
choice.
we always
programming.
use Python.
In desperation, because I couldn't make a timeline yesterday, I tried to use Excel, and I was like, no, I'm going to do it right. So did it with Python.
Yeah, and whatever passive DNS provider you have access to, VirusTotal is pretty easy to use.
Yeah, I have access to 4 different passive DNS tools, and I'd like to combine them. Maybe I should, but yeah.
So thank you very much,
Yeah,
Josh
thanks.
Fiore and Andreas Carthel.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, cheers.